Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call this joint meeting between the Board of Education and Lakewood City Council of September 13, 2024 to order. Since this is a public meeting for the school district, I am going to ask for a roll call of school board members. So roll call, please, Ms. Zavada.
Director Appleby. Director Kenworthy.
Here.
Director Parker.
Here.
Director Reed. Here. Dr. Varda.
Here. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm excited to welcome our Lakewood elected colleagues and city staff to join us today for a collaborative discussion of how our shared interest and investment in our communities. Engaging with our municipal colleagues is a priority for this board. The children and families who live in Lakewood are served by Jeffco schools. We have a shared interest in ensuring all Jeffco students have the opportunity for bright and successful futures as local and global citizens. I want to acknowledge Jeffco Superintendent Tracy Dorland is here, and Lakewood's Mayor Wendy Strom is here. And at this point, I do want all of us to go around the table and introduce ourselves. And when you do that, I'd like you to say one thing that you hope to gain from this meeting. We only have 1 hour, so we can't solve all the problems of the state. But anyway, I'm going to start off. My name is Mary Parker. I am the president of the Jeffco School Board, and my hope for this meeting is that we all have a shared sense of purpose, and we feel that we're on the same page and we know where we're going. I'm just going to pass it off now to Mayor Strom.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Strom, Mayor of Lakewood, and welcome everybody. I know this has been something that has been a long time coming. You know, honestly, we started off with no agenda other than to really come together as a body that, you know, we've got a lot of shared interests and a lot of shared residents, stakeholders, all of the like. So I really appreciate the opportunity for us to be here, and my goal today is that we leave feeling cohesive and together and working together for the better good of our mutual communities.
Good afternoon, Jocelyn Sharzai. I represent Ward 1 in Lakewood, so the northwest corner, and hoping just to understand where our values overlap and our shared sense of success and some of the things that we're navigating right now.
Wait, that just made a noise. Okay, there we go. Paula Reed, I'm on the school board. And what I'm hoping is that we can work together for our constituents and communicate to our constituents that we are working together, that we are not in conflict or at cross purposes, unless, of course, we actually are. But I don't necessarily perceive that that is a necessity. So I want to make sure that our constituents understand that.
Hi, Jacob LeBure. I represent Ward 5. That's the southern part of Lakewood. And just thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion. So thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Michelle Applegate, Secretary of the Board of Education. I'm really excited just to have some face-to-face communication. You know, as the Board of Ed, we often say that sometimes our biggest successes come when we can sit down together and have open conversations, and so that's what I'm really looking forward to today.
Roger Lowe, Lakewood City Council Ward 3. Plus one to what's been said, looking to identify areas for mutual collaboration in general, and I would say specifically with respect to properties in Lakewood that I know you all are looking at the future of, that are certainly of great importance and interest to us and our constituents.
Hello, Glenda Sinks, also Ward 1, Northwest Corner. And I think what I want to take away is a better understanding of the parameters that Jeffco School District has to work within as you eliminate and, you know, turn over some schools into the community.
Hi, Tracy Dorland, Superintendent of Jeffco Public Schools, and I'm happy to be here in support of our board as they have what I hope is a productive conversation with our City Council in Lakewood. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Scratchy voice, Kathy Hodson, City Manager. Tomorrow I celebrate 15 years as City Manager. And what I'm looking forward to is really strengthening our partnership.
Thank you. Hi, Sofia Macarero. I am Ward 2 City Council person, so that's the northeast part of Lakewood. And I will echo that. I'm looking forward to just strengthening our relationship and also some of the other items shared by both the school board and my fellow counselors of wanting to identify our shared community values and how to work together on those.
Hi, I'm Danielle Varda. I'm school board treasurer. I represent the north end of the district, Westminster, Nevada. And I'm just looking forward to building connections.
Hi, I'm Paula Nystrom, Ward 5, which is south part of Lakewood. And I'm happy to be here and meet everybody, and I'm looking forward to trying to get a better picture of the long-term strategy for schools as we go forward. So, thank you.
Dave Ryan, Ward 4, Green Mountain area. I'm hoping that we can develop a framework to have more productive discussions about the school disposition issue.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Kenworthy, Jeffco Board of Ed Second Vice President, and representing District 4, which is the Evergreen, Alameda International, and Bear Creek articulation areas. 2 of those are in Lakewood. I'm a 15-year-long Lakewood resident, and I'm looking forward to us discussing what our shared opportunities are for mutual benefit for both of our organizations and our shared community.
Hi, everyone. Isabel Cruz, she, her, they, pronouns. I am one of the city councilors in Ward 2 for Lakewood, and echoing the shared sentiments of looking to build connections, mutual understanding on our shared values, and figuring out how we can best work together, and grateful for the opportunity to have FaceTime with you too, as Director Applegate said.
Sorry, I did not give you my district. And I represent Golden, Green Mountain, Lakewood, and Jefferson. So I was realizing since 2 of my schools are in Lakewood, it would be helpful if you knew that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think it's kind of clear from the introductions and the interest that were expressed, the property dispositions, the status of them right now, and the process that we're going through is of great interest. So in the interest of time, we only have 50 some more minutes. I think we'll go directly to that topic of property disposition. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Director Kenworthy just to start off the conversation from the district's perspective.
Thank you, President Parker. We are excited to have this meeting finally happening. It's been coming for a while. I'm grateful that we're finally here together face-to-face at the table. And in preparation for the meeting, we did receive some questions from the City of Lakewood. So I'm going to share the questions that we have and then some of our district and board response to each of those questions, if that's okay, an okay way to start out. The first question we had from the City of Lakewood is, with the eventual and natural recycling of older neighborhoods resulting in new demand for schools, how will the school board address future needs in areas where schools were closed? And so we want to let you know the school board has done extensive study of demographics with a boundary study that we did last year. It's available online in our board docs. And we will get a presentation from the State Demographer's Office on October 17th. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to join us here in person or watch online. We also encourage City Council to invite the State Demographer to a meeting so that you can hear what they have to say about moving demographics in Lakewood. While we believe there will be some stabilization, there's no data that predicts an increase in school-aged children in Jeffco as far as the model predicts for right now. So it's not... we are not anticipating that we're going to need to use some of the schools that we have surplused or that are in the pathway towards being surplused. The district has plans to do a concentrated demographic study on the city of Lakewood in the next 6 months, and we'll look forward to studying results with you. So if we have further information, then we're happy to share. Do you want to do follow-ups to that one? Yeah. So I'm going to stop there before I move on to the second question that we received and see if there are any follow-up questions about demographics or study.
Thank you. We also had a presentation from the state demographer last year that indicated the same thing. I've also seen that same presentation at Dr. Cog. So all of the information is pointing to a decrease in young people in our community. So, any updated information we would welcome being shared. I think what I'd like to better understand is just what is the timeline for some of the other considerations. So you are looking at school-age children. We know that is a shrinking population, and you have made adjustments in your inventory for that. We saw some middle schools, I think, in this last school year. But is this going to be? Is there like a timeline for continued evaluation of that in response to changing demographics and population in the community, or can we expect this to be sort of where we settle for a little bit?
I'll try, and then you want to follow up. So we are using the boundary study as a jumping off point so that we continue to monitor shifts as they occur. And right now we have no future plans for changing our school inventory. And after several years go by, there's potential that could change. And I'm going to hand it over.
Thank you. We've, as mentioned, just finished a lengthy and intricate boundary study for our school district. The effort, that study had many reasons for conducting it and paying for it. One of the things that was so important to me is that the district has information at its fingertips and a better roadmap than it did when I arrived in April of 2021 and realized we had an urgent situation with declining enrollment that hadn't been dealt with in over a decade. We really had no plan. We had no conversations with communities other than some suggested closures 5 or 6 years earlier that I don't think were handled very appropriately. And so we now have a boundary study that gives us what I would call a roadmap. I mean, nobody can predict the future, but it's at least a roadmap, and it tells the district, the Board of Education, staff, and our community, because it's public, what's on the horizon with our demographics. There are 3 short-term recommendations in that boundary study, 2 of which the board has approved, and they were minor changes to a couple of areas that are overlapping boundaries, and they said just clean that up. It's not going to impact families drastically. So the board's taking care of that. The third area that it calls out as more of a short term, like in the next year or 2, is the Jefferson articulation area. We have a 712 Jefferson Junior Senior, and the demographic study has just identified that it's going to continue to decline in enrollment, and it calls for us to really take a look at the October count, which is the official count for students based on the state's requirement. And so we're going to be doing some due diligence to just look at and confirm numbers in the Jefferson Junior Senior school this fall, and then by January begin speaking with that community, which again aligns to our interest in having a longer runway to engage community before making any future decisions on what options. Outside of those 3 areas, there are longer term areas that the boundary study calls for us to keep an eye on. And there are several areas where it says you may have 4 elementary schools here, and in the next 5 to 6 years, you may need to go from 5 to 4. But at least it's calling it out. It's public, it's transparent, and we will not have additional school closures outside of the immediate things that we need to look at within the next 3 years. I do think the district will be, if I'm being honest, I do think the district will be facing further closures, but not in the near term. And we now have a guide to help us develop a strategic capital plan that actually puts some ideas on the table around how we can support the communities that may need to be facing closures in the future. For example, do we close 2 schools and build a brand new one? Where, by the way, some areas of our district have very old buildings. And could that be a possible suggestion that's in the future strategic plan? And so those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, but we have some data that we can now use as we move our capital plan forward. And it's available if you want to see it. I can get it to Kathy and she can share it with council. The boundary study is very helpful and it's actually fascinating information.
If I could add to that, the other thing that it does is it brings it up on a regular cadence before the board. So it's not something that just sits on a shelf. It's something that is living, breathing, and informative for us. So it's not just a one and done. It's something that we plan to look at on a regular cadence.
Are there any other follow-up questions for that one? If not, then I'm going to move on to our second question from the City of Lakewood is, how does the school board address and balance fiscal needs and desires with community needs and desires? Something that we all have to manage from the seats that we sit in. We recognize that the district possesses vacant buildings that represent both financial opportunity and potential assets to the community, and we acknowledge the dual objectives of generating maximum revenue from the sale or long-term lease of these properties for reinvestment in Jeffco's students, while also considering opportunities to serve the educational, social, and economic needs of our shared community. Proposals will be assessed based on how they contribute to the educational outcomes and well-being of students. This includes important reinvestment of any revenue generated from sales or leases directly into the maintenance and/or enhancement of facilities currently in use by our around 75,000 Jeffco students. While district properties can be a valuable asset, they cannot single-handedly solve broader community issues. We believe strongly that the district is currently working in good faith with Jeffco municipalities to collaborate actively and strategically to leverage our shared resources and our expertise to work together and address community needs, enhance public services, strengthen opportunities for students and their families, and contribute to the overall well-being and sustainability of our community. I will also add that that funding and budgeting balance is something that we're all familiar with at this point, having to find a way to balance out what we need to provide and who we need to prioritize when we're making those decisions. But I think that we can have a meaningful conversation here and welcome any follow-up questions about this. Any thoughts? Go ahead.
So you mentioned a couple of things that I'd like to see if you could flesh out a little bit more. You mentioned that one of the factors that the school district might be looking at is ultimately what kind of revenue generating. Are you referring to the fact that if someone is proposing to use the property that's going to generate taxes to support the school district, that receives a higher factor or higher importance? What maybe a better way of just asking, what do you mean when you say ultimately developing revenue generating properties?
We're talking about the fact that the sale of the property generates capital revenue. So not necessarily ongoing revenue generation, but that we do have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that all of our assets are used for the education of our students. And there are times that community interests overlap and that we can serve our students' educational needs as well as, as do things that the community might want. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that the assets that we have are employed to help us educate our students.
And that would also, there's also the mention of the sustainability of the community is an important aspect of that. So to the extent that the property that's sold, it contributes to the sustainability of the community, that would be important to the school district then, I would assume.
Sure. And there would be lots of ways to contribute to this, the sustaining of a community, but it would be part of the calculus.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear that articulated. I think what I'd love to understand is, like, obviously staff changes, council changes, school board changes, but there is a lot of precedent amongst our two organizations on just a real generosity around parcels of land. The Link is a great example. That was a gift from the schools to the city of Lakewood, paired with some cash for demolition. I know also there's been a relationship with nonprofits directly, Gold Crown being a great example. They were sold that building for $1, and that's a tremendous community asset. And so what I'm hoping to better understand, particularly with Emory, because this is going to be an opportunity for us to be serving the same Director Reed, to your point about serving your students and sustaining the community, like what could happen in that parcel with a move of the Action Center would be a tremendous resource for the same families that you're serving in your schools. And so would love to just better understand, like, there has been a precedent of real flexibility and the bottom line on what those costs are. And is that something that you all are still striving for? If there is a public benefit, does that sort of outweigh the cost? Like, we know that there's appraisal values and all sorts of things with these parcels of land, but there's also an unmeasured response to community needs that these could meet. And so is that still a priority from the school board, from you all in your seats, of how we could use these spaces to continue to be community assets in the public domain?
I'll add a couple things here. When we first started the work on property disposition, we had a process that was for commercial but prospects. And then we subsequently added the municipal process because we want to work with our cities and our districts. So we already made one big leap, I would say. We realized we don't want to just make these all commercial sales and just have it be developed. So that was the first stage, and we are still learning from that. We're learning from the community meetings that we've held and from the feedback, the public comments we get and the emails that we get. And what we are in the process of doing on the school board right now is developing what I'll call property disposition 2.0. It's similar to what happened with our school closures. We did a round of school closures of elementary schools, and we learned a lot from that. So we put together a resolution that talked about ROFS, the Regional Opportunity for Thriving Schools 2.0, the next phase of it. And we identified the things that we had learned and the priorities that had been uncovered, the values that had been uncovered. So the second round of closings took account of what we learned from the first round. So I feel like we are in the very beginning stages. We just have 2 properties really that had contracts on them that were put out through the proposal process. We learned a lot from that. Now we've got additional properties that we have started to receive proposals for. We will learn when we see who's interested in the properties, what are they planning to do with it, and then meld that with the community feedback that we get from the meetings that we've been holding, the emails we're getting, the comments we're getting, and then this discussion. So I feel like we're still learning, and nothing has been taken off the table, and I'm happy about that.
I'm going to follow up and just say, Lakewood, we are having a shared opportunity for learning right now, right? As we're starting a process that's going to be ongoing for several years with the dispositioning of these buildings. And you are the lucky municipality that is involved in some of our very first transactions. So we are learning and we're receiving feedback, and we are trying to hold space for adjusting our processes so that we can better work not only with you, but with other municipalities that we're going to be in conversation with in the future. So we really appreciate this opportunity to learn together with you. And we're going to probably have more face-to-face conversations so that we can understand where our values lie and how we're going to be mutually beneficial to everybody that we serve, our organizations and the community.
And I just want to add, I'm going to speak as myself, but I do believe, and Director Reed said it, every one of these properties is unique in what they offer the municipality and what they offer the Board of Education. And so I think the one thing that I have learned right off the bat is there's not one magic answer. That said, I believe that this board is very interested in making sure that there is a good outcome to the greatest extent possible for our communities and our children. You know, our mission is to serve our kids and educate our kids, and we believe very strongly in that. And we know that they are a significant and very important part of the community of Lakewood. And so I think the answer to your question is we are willing to consider all offers, and there's a calculus within them. And sometimes revenue's higher, sometimes community's higher, but it really depends on what the solution is and the opportunity is. So yes, I think we are there. It's just really, in my opinion, solution dependent per location.
I'm going to add one thing, and I might be playing the devil's advocate a little bit, but there is not one property where a citizen or an elected official has not come to us and had a great idea for a community center, a park. I mean, not one building has not had that proposal put forward to us. Because of the public accountability that we have and our constituents' expectation that we manage our public dollars in certain ways, there's no way we could give away all of our buildings. And what I've been concerned about since day one is that we have a fair process that's very public, that all people follow, and there's no backdoor deals, no handshakes, no one, and I'm not suggesting that is happening here, but so for that reason, we ask that there be a separate process put in place that allows us to address municipal requests and concerns as a priority. But that has to follow the same process across all cities in our district, in our county. And so that it's just a concern to me that you know, folks might have the impression that we have in our power to give buildings away. But I think once we do it once, I would expect everyone to expect the same from us. So I want to be fair and process oriented in our work.
Thank you, everybody. I wanted to, I don't know if a point of clarification would be the right way to term it, but there have been comments made about, you know, the disposition of other properties in the past that came with little to no cost. And the city, we're not necessarily asking for free property in case that came out that way. You know, we're all operating in a reality of budget constraints, and we appreciate that. But there is also a big gray area between how we value properties. And I think that that's part of the challenge of figuring out what we can acquire, what's inappropriate, again, staying in that line of public trust, accountability, transparency for public funds, and also being able to, you know, what we would like to be able to do is to rescue some of the parkland out of these communities that, you know, have been through, I would say in many circumstances, a pretty traumatic experience of losing the heart of their community, the heart of their neighborhood. And so I really appreciate hearing that, but I wanted to make clear we're not coming to the meeting today asking for a bunch of free property.
So I just want to add to that, when it comes to those processes and the municipal process, we are tweaking that as we learn. And so one of the things that's happening is that for municipalities, that's becoming a longer process than we would give to a developer, so that we have time to have the discussions and to look at perhaps a different, a somewhat different metric that does include ways that the possible use could benefit students in other ways. And so, like, for example, I had a constituent very upset because they were under the impression that the district was not selling anything for anything less than absolute top dollar, and that if a municipality could not match what a developer could match, that we would not be willing to move off of that price. And that is not the case, and I want to make that very clear. So it doesn't mean that we're giving property away, but it also does not mean that we are unwilling to budge from top dollar. There are a lot of pieces that go into the calculus of these decisions, and price is one of them. It's not the only one.
Roger, did you have a comment?
I give up. Oh, please. Yeah, I agree. No worries. You sure? You good? All right. I guess maybe this is something you could provide to Kathy also to send to us, but it sounds like you've gotten a lot of feedback and suggestions and ideas, and that's great. I guess one thing I have a question on, and maybe this is a follow-up, is have you considered repurposing one of the schools, maintaining the property, and using it for Jeffco Public Schools office space versus paying rent? Because obviously these buildings come with a lot of overhead, and these are already properties that are in the public school domain, right? But again, I'd be interested to hear some of the other opportunities that have been suggested.
I'll just say something briefly, and I don't know if the superintendent has a comment too, but part of our capital asset planning, the new master plan that we're going into, could certainly take into consideration all of the buildings that we have, all of the buildings that we're using right now. If any of them are not being used to capacity for our employees, our staff, whatever, moving that administrative portion into one of our existing schools might happen. It might. I don't know, but it's a good point. It's a good question, and I'm hoping we could consider it in our master plan.
Thank you for the question. At this time, we are not renting office space. And with the declining enrollment, as we create a smaller footprint of buildings across the county, we are also creating a smaller central services team. And so those two things are related to one another on a ratio. And I do anticipate we'll need less office space in the future if we, as our enrollment continues to decline, because we'll need fewer central services. But I'm looking at our guys over here. I don't think we rent any of our office space across our three kind of central office yet. So it wouldn't be a cost savings unless we were to sell one of the buildings that we're currently using for things like operations. And sometimes those have unique needs and, work that's happening in them that might not be ideal for the middle of a neighborhood, like our transportation centers and other operations facilities. But that is something that we can definitely think about more as we move into our strategic planning. So thank you.
I got permission from Councilor Lowe to go next, since it's kind of a follow-up with Director Reed. She spoke about the misunderstanding that she had heard that, market values it. And also on our end, there have been things that we've heard as well that are misunderstandings, like, we heard Lakewood's not interested in any of the property, etc. And so I also, acknowledge what you said earlier, that this is new ground and things have been learned. And so I just wonder whether you have knowledge of how to change so that moving forward there aren't as many misunderstandings, or just consider how to keep those misunderstandings from happening.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think one of the priorities of our school board and the district is to work more closely with municipalities. We learned that, at least this current school board learned it during our closures. It was very important, very obvious. And so I think the superintendent has made a great effort to make sure that we are participating across organizations and having things like this. So it's a good point.
If I could add on that, and then I'll share the mic right over. We are also refining our process, right? So as President Parker said, this process came out and we were like, oh, we don't have a municipal process. So now we added that. And as I think we can put those refinements in place to come to our municipalities, like here's the flow chart, here's the schedule, here's what we are expecting, when we should communicate back and forth and timeframes around that. And I think when everybody can clearly understand that, it will help us to make sure we're not having those miscommunications.
In addition to that, one of the things we're going to be asking municipalities to do is to express a formal yes or no on a property. I know that in my case, there were constituents that I was saying Lakewood hasn't expressed an interest in this property because at that point, one hadn't been expressed yet. So if we have more clear, we come to municipalities, we say this is up, and in the next, couple of weeks, can you say, yes, we're interested, or no, we're not? Then we can be more clear and we don't accidentally say something that's not true.
One more concrete, and then we're going to let poor Roger go. One more concrete piece related to this. So a very important lesson learned that I think is critical to this conversation. When we first started, we had a guiding principle that we would not subdivide properties. We have since rethought that, and we are working on a process by which if we come to a city and say, are you interested? It's not an all or nothing kind of conversation, which it was, by the way. But we're working on revising that because what we've learned from our city partners in conversations with Kathy and her colleagues who are across cities in Jeffco is we don't want the whole thing, but we may want a portion of it in the interest of our plans as a city and in the interest of the citizens who live nearby. So really appreciate that feedback from Kathy in particular, because she's been going through it more than her other colleagues. And it really has caused us to reflect and say, should that be a guiding principle? Or in our municipal process, should we come up with ways to allow our city partners to express an interest in a portion of the property and thereby possibly be willing to subdivide the property and take the portion the city is not interested in through the more public process, but work more directly with the city on the portion they are interested in. So our team is working on this. We're working quickly. We've been sharing these ideas and some materials related to this with our Board of Education. We have not published things yet because our Board of Education needs to weigh in and they need some time to process these ideas. And we are quickly working through this. And I just wanted to name that as an example, a really concrete example of something we've learned and are working to revise.
Thank you. I really appreciate this discussion. I just want to build on points that a couple of my colleagues have already brought up. We are interested. Lakewood is let the record show. Lakewood is clearly interested. And to the mayor's point, we're not expecting these properties to be handed over at zero cost. And we're also very cognizant, based on the records we've reviewed from staff, that there is a real history of acquiring some of these properties at or meaningfully below the parkland rates. I guess what I would just say is Emory in particular is in Ward 3. I can literally walk there. It's a beautiful area. I know we're all on the same page and all feel the same way that there is a real meaningful trauma associated in a neighborhood when a school closes. And we all feel that. We all hear from our constituents. It's very real. I also fully understand the demographic and financial realities that drive it, which we talked about earlier. But I do want to emphasize that that for some of these communities that trauma could be compounded if these properties are not disposed of in a way that really prioritizes the neighborhood communal public benefits. And so to the extent there is a local partner that really is asking to be considered as a buyer, and we are, and is willing to offer a fair rate and has a plan that is in the public interest, I do think that should be a really serious consideration. And finally, I would just add to what the Mayor Pro Tem already brought up. The Action Center does such good work in Lakewood. The families that we know you all have in mind when you talk about sort of the financial considerations, which are real, I know they're real. The Action Center serves some of the lowest income families in Jeffco public schools, and so what a great opportunity in the face of the trauma that is entailed by a school like Emory closing, to look for opportunities to help a phenomenal neighborhood organization like the Action Center grow and continue to serve that community rather than being displaced from the community. I do think that should be a really central priority as this issue is handled by both the board and the council.
I would like to just build on that well-made point, Councillor Lowe, which so Ward 2 also had Mulholm Close, which is not yet up for discussion, and of course that is a property where Lakewood already manages, like, part of the conjoined property is a city park, and so that is obviously something that has come up for me already often of what is happening with this parcel, and I think it is so related to this. This was a service and a part of Lakewood that has lacked community centers and lacked community gathering places and lacked parks, and so there is an intersection happening with where the schools closed are the schools that had lower enrollment and also therefore had lower investment in the buildings because they would have taken so much to keep them up to date. And that then coincides with other neighborhoods that have had a lack of investment historically. And that is not the fault of the current school board or the current city council. And I don't mean it to be like that, but we all recognize the way that we are often in a position of trying to undo problems that were put here, not by any one of us around this table. And so I do just want to really double down on this notion that there is an immeasurable harm that we're talking about in these underserved neighborhoods and parts of Lakewood that the schools have been so symbolic and so necessary for community building and are the main park for a neighborhood, and so that the potential of permanently losing those public goods is so devastating both to the local families there, but really I think to Lakewood as a whole. And frankly, I think that the amount of rumors that it sounds like we're all hearing about each other is also just really not okay, right? Like I think it's really clear from what we're all expressing that we are trying to be on the same team. And so I think the other thing that I want to just put out there, right, which is that I am not the person who's going to write the contracts. I don't think you all are. You might be more involved. You're more involved, right? But I think that there is something else, at least for me, that I'm asking for from the elected side in particular, which is like a signal of alliance on some of these virtues, not asking you to then not talk about the value of you need to be able to fund your current students. You need to be able to leverage these properties in the ways that you must for the future of the schools. And I think none of us don't have a lot of respect for that need. But just to really be able to hear some of the solidarity that we're getting to in the room around that, yes, of course, those community values are things that we are all sharing, I think in and of itself has been important and is helpful, because so much of what we do as part-time leaders, right, part-time electeds and policymakers is signal values, lead, set ambitious goalposts, and hope that we're able to then get there. And so I just wanted to bring that component into the room, that we're actually not really the people who deal with the nitty-gritty of the negotiations.
I want to build on what has been said by both counselors. I think it's important, and I think the Board of Ed feels similarly, right? We know the trauma that this has caused, and those decisions were not made ever lightly. In fact, I can guarantee you that, because I get emotional. We share the values, right? These kids are our future, they're our community, they're everything. And so I can definitely say, rumors aside, all that nonsense aside, that I believe the electeds and I believe the people doing the work have aligned values. We just have to sit down and figure out the details.
I'd also like to address a rumor that's out there, unfortunately. No decisions have been made, and they are not likely to be made in the next week. And there's a whole set of processes. There'll be a decision made by the teams that have been put together to evaluate the proposal. So there will be first a decision from that committee, and then the district will think about it, and the district will eventually, and it won't be that soon, bring it to the board. And then when the board talks about it, I just remember from the conversations we had from our first 2 properties, it was not easy. We didn't really all agree right away. Great. All right, let's sign the contract now. There were a lot of discussions. Is this the right developer to use, and is it the right price? What'll happen if we hold on to it a little longer? Would the market change? It was not an easy vote, and so there are plenty more days for us to have discussions on this, and plenty more options for community input and making sure that we are considering everything that could possibly impact it. So no decisions have been made.
Thanks. A couple of times you all have referenced that the municipal process has been changed a little bit. So if it's possible, would love to see what that looks like. Because I think for in our district, in Ward 1, the Vivian property in particular, we missed, so to Director Reed's point, Lakewood originally didn't signal interest because we hadn't heard from the community that there was interest in it. And then we were way past that process where we could have entered into it and then understood from community members who had a very strong opinion on that. So would love to just understand, where are there the places that we can activate community, because this will come up again, and we want to be great partners on this.
If the board's okay, I'll go ahead and answer this. So it's relative to a few things that Director Reed mentioned, as well as what I had talked about as a concrete example a couple minutes ago. So we are looking at revising the municipal process to say we would call the city manager and ask staff to staff, is the city interested in this property? The city may say, yes, we want the whole thing, and then we would enter into negotiations for price, right? If the city says yes, but only X number of acres or X portion of the property, then we would begin negotiations on that part of the property. And we would then put the rest of the property through our other disposition process, which, by the way, is resulting in not only offers from developers, but also offers from other people who want to use the building as is, right? And so we would put that through the more public process, this portion of land that the city is not interested in. And then we will see if we get viable offers on that portion of land. What we believe is that we will most likely get viable offers on the other portion of land, and then we could go through the municipal process on whatever portion the city's interested in, and the more public process on other portions of the property. This is what we've been talking with our board about very recently, and we are just trying to sort of get some feedback from them. We've been reaching out to city managers to get their feedback on this idea. So that's one, just process change. And then the other thing I would say is Director Reed mentioned really providing some different timelines so that the city has a minute to think about it before they say yes or no, possibly check in with council members in those wards, right, or that ward. Get a better sense of what do we think our community is interested in this, what do we think is beneficial in this part of town, given other parklands, other city properties, and get back to us. So we're changing both timeline to allow the city more breathing room to do some process on their end, as well as the process itself, in particular, the splitting up of the property and being more open to that.
That whole process would kick off the moment that the school board votes to surplus a property. When that is up on our agenda and we vote on that, that would immediately kick off the process, where then the municipalities would be contacted, and then there would be wait time between when we surplus the building and when we would need a response about whether or not there was interest. I just wanted to clarify the beginning of the process.
And it would be a known time, which we think is really important.
And it would be sufficient time for you to hold community meetings if you needed to.
And then are these offers, will they be reviewed, and then if you don't like it, is it just we don't like this one and we're going to go to the other offers, or is it an opportunity to sort of recalibrate.
Well, I will say, based on the first two properties, there is work done before it gets to the board. And so we do have the advisory committees, and we've got the district itself. And we do not always know what the other offers were yet, or other possibilities. But we can defer a decision on something. We can say we're not comfortable with it. We can ask questions again of the district. Were there any other options, and find out why they weren't selected. So really, it's a process that is not, it's not going fast at all. And we want to make sure that we get it right.
I would also say that we have given direction to staff from the dais that we would like to see the offers, not just the highest dollar, but offers that involve community benefit, offers that come from the organizations that Superintendent Dorland mentioned that aren't developers. So we have given that direction to staff, and they're aware of that.
Great, thanks. Because just to reiterate what everyone else on our council I know has said is we are very motivated to get some wins for the community, which we know that means a lot of different things. But from our perspective, I think a lot of that means trying to get some parkland. Let's be frank, and things like that. So thanks.
Just to follow up to Superintendent's second point about revising the timeline. And we're so thankful for your flexibility on that, because certainly as it goes to the city, we will need space to go to the constituents. Now, fortunately, we've had some constituents that have taken the lead, so thank you all for coming and for your involvement. And even though the process was a bit shaky here at the beginning and you were able to jump in, we're so thankful for that. And again, hopefully as we move forward, as the superintendent has said, it won't be like, oh no, we will have that time built in. So thank you for all that.
Directly to add to that, I know a notice went out very recently related to Vivian. So Vivian, we had not revised our process, right? What we have done in the interest of the feedback that the city and the district have received is the process starts off with a very initial high-level offer process. It comes in and we may get 7, 8, or 9 offers on a parcel. That goes to our property disposition advisory committee with ad hoc members from that specific neighborhood. They then make a decision about which of the offers goes back out for a call for offer, which is a more detailed offer then coming in that would again be reviewed by the property disposition advisory committee. Because Vivian was in the middle of the process, we worked with our property disposition advisory committee to send the call for offers out to the second round of offers with the declaration that the city of Lakewood is interested in additional acreage for a park. And so I want to make it clear that even though the process has not been revised yet, we have inserted a requirement in the call for offers that the developer give us a response that with the awareness that the city is interested in 3 acres. So I just want to make that clear that to everybody that has been adjusted in the call for offers on the Vivian property. And we did work through our property disposition advisory committee to get that done.
Can I just clarify in that process? Thank you, because I've actually heard from a developer on this. So is the anticipation then that we are now working directly with the developers to secure that, or we would continue to work with you all and it's been signaled that the parcel may be less an acreage available to the developers?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think we had public comment last night about this same issue and there's confusion. The city is working directly with the district. At some point, we're all going to have to work with the developer. Given all the details that we know go into these things. But right now, we're working directly with Kathy and her staff.
I just want to say I'm very appreciative of the school board for being flexible and making some of these changes, I think, for the best. I also am very grateful that it sounds like there's some shared feelings on Councilor Lowe's thoughts that, for example, if there's the possibility of using this property for a public use that's going to benefit the kids, that is an important factor that the school district is going to consider. The other piece I just want to maybe try and highlight a little bit is that, as you mentioned, each property is different, each school is different, and there may be properties that the city is not going to try and acquire some or all of the property, but still has a very real interest in trying to encourage the school board to look at how those properties are ultimately sold and how those uses are going to be, because as was articulated much better than I can, the trauma of what's going on, preserving the character of the neighborhood that is left to the extent possible is so very, very important, even if the city is not playing a role in purchasing any of that property. So thank you for those three things.
I'd like to dovetail on Councilor Ryan's gratitude for the discussion and work on creating or improving the overall process. I'll say as mayor in a community that two of the schools were up for discussion, I was caught off guard twice, and hearing things from community that they were hearing that weren't accurate, or most recently with a very, very short time horizon of being able to send in my appointment for the neighborhood committee. And unfortunately that resulted in at least one of the meetings not having the mayor's appointment at the table. So I really, really appreciate not only the elongated amount of time, but the direct communication. It's not just updating a website. It's literally a phone call that says, hey, here's the time and we need to hear from you by X date. So thank you very much for that.
I know we're getting towards the end of the discussion, and I think a lot of the values we shared at the beginning of getting some mutual understanding and maybe dealing with some of the different things we've all been hearing from our constituents has been really reflected. So I wanted to just echo my fellow counselors and the director's appreciation for that. I just had two questions that I particularly, I think, as my co-counselor signaled, I know we're going to be anticipating some work on this in our area. And so just really would love to understand with the property disposition advisory committees and all of those pieces, how, how the land was acquired is factored into the decision, because I know that that's something we hear a lot in the community about how, the school board came to get some of these properties, as well as whether the school was a Title I school and who it was serving, right? Because I do think that matters and is different with regard to what the resources were available there and what resources need to be available moving forward. So would love some clarity on that.
Thank you for those ideas. We have not had conversations around how was the land acquired. We have to do a lot of due diligence just around previous or current liens on our buildings that have been utilized for certificates of participation in many years ago and are still sort of in that process. So this is great feedback. We have also heard from other community members this same feedback, so I appreciate you bringing it up. We will take a look at it. And I think your point around if the school was serving was identified as a Title I school serving an at-risk population, the school was providing services in that community that may no longer be there in that school. What I will tell you is the receiving schools that those students are attending, which are often in the same neighborhood, do have those same services. And so I just want to reinforce the fact that we made sure, and a large part of our process was any students who went to a receiving school, we had the receiving school understand who were those students, what was their background, what were their needs, and we did specific training for staff and added resources into the receiving schools around social emotional learning, social work, psychology, all of those additional wraparound services. So, and often it's fascinating when I say this, but oftentimes some of our schools are literally 1.5 miles apart, right? So so I do want to make sure people know that we have been very conscientious of the resources and services that were available in the closed schools and made sure that we got those services into the receiving schools as the students transitioned. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, and just to say too, I mean, I'm speaking about Mulholm, and I think that Lumberg has done an amazing job of receiving those students. And also, 1.5 miles when you're crossing Colfax and you're 5 is different, right, than crossing other streets. And so we'll talk about this at another time, but I really appreciate you all taking all of that into consideration with this conversation.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a few things. We did have one exception with Sheridan Green, which was owned by the city of Westminster. So we did have one exception already. Just wanted to call out where there was a previous ownership question, and they took over the school right away. We weren't involved in the next steps for it. But one thing I wanted to kind of share and hope that as a group we can also do, there tends to be a lot of panic as soon as the board gets asked to vote on putting a school into disposition. And I'm up in Arvada where we closed 11 properties just north of I-70, so we hear it a lot. And one thing I always tell folks is that's actually like a really good moment for the school, because until then it's going to be an empty building, an empty school in your neighborhood. So I think people, for some reason, fear the concept of putting it into disposition, but until it goes into disposition, we can't have any of these conversations and plan the future of it. So I think helping all of our community members know that that's a really good moment and not like the worst, because that's when we tend to get the most emails and the most fear, I think, around it. So I think it would be helpful if we all like helped people understand that that's a good part of our process. And you had asked a question about what we might do with some of the buildings. So I just also wanted to say there's a couple, like Witt Elementary, that some folks are leasing to provide more services for some of our special needs kids, special ed kids. So some of our schools we are keeping for the purpose of having other folks use them at more middle school. We are, I don't know how definitive this we're talking about bringing in a public safety program into the school and reusing the school for that reason. And so there are schools that we are really trying to bring in either programming or expand services to our kids by keeping the property. So we are maybe not saving money that way, but leasing some or using them for different reasons. So just wanted to share some of the news about the schools.
Thank you. And we have reached the end of our hour, and as no surprise to anybody, we could keep going, but I am going to close it up now. And some of the last conversations we had made me realize the district is talking about lots of properties. If we were talking about just one, and we could consider how do we get the property, what are the benefits to the community, and so forth, it would be a much easier discussion. But in the back of my mind, I know every time I think about, okay, we're going to do this on this property, what does it mean for a similar one or other communities? Or are we going to be locking ourselves in any way? So it's so massive. It was massive to close the schools. It's massive to dispose of them. So you guys are helping us out in this area in the Lakewood, and I really appreciate it. So that does bring us to the end of today's agenda. I want to thank you all for coming. I think this was a great use of 1 hour. I actually haven't been to a meeting in the last, I don't know how many years that got this much done in 1 hour. But anyway, we will stand adjourned. The school board's next regularly scheduled meeting is a study session scheduled at 4:30 p.m. on October 9th at the Ed Center. So thank you all for coming.